Welcome to the Omnibus Show, a program for people who are interested in everything, with deep conversations on a wide variety of subjects. And now your host, Dave Gibbs.
Hello, and welcome to this episode of the Omnibus Show, a program for people who are interested in everything, with deep conversations on a wide variety of subjects. This week's guest is Curt Simic. He's the Indiana University Foundation President Emeritus. He's a national leader in fundraising for higher education. In his over 40-year career, he worked for Yale University and the universities of Tennessee, Alabama, Oregon, and California-Berkeley before returning to Indiana University as president of its foundation in 1988. As president of the IU Foundation, he was the Chief Development Officer for Indiana University, responsible for oversight of all fundraising in a multi-campus development operation with centralized and decentralized functions, investment of the endowment, and development-related administrative services and infrastructure. Well, Curt, that's quite a lot.
It sounds big, doesn't it?
It does sound big. Well, welcome. It's great to have you.
Good to be here. Thank you.
Good to have some fellow IU man, and well, welcome. And also, we're native of the same county. You were born in Lake County in Gary, but you grew up in Couts, so you're an all-around Hoosier. And we went to Indiana University. What got you interested in development for higher education? What drew you into that as you were developing in your studies and so forth?
I really didn't know philanthropy. My family was a big family. My dad was a laborer, and the concern really was to get enough food on the table. But then I came to IU, and I kind of lost, 21 kids in my high school class, and you come to a class of 5,000 or 6,000. I was trying to find my way, but I came to summer school, and at summer school there was only one residence hall open. It was MRC in those days, but it's the Collins Living Learning Center now. And there were two groups. One group was all the athletes trying to stay eligible for their sports, and the other group was the Russian Language Institute. I thought, boy, that doesn't fit at all. But it turned out to be a very good experience. But I sort of gravitated to the jocks, and I fell in with a bunch of gymnasts, and they said, "Where are you going to live next year?" And I said, "I don't know. I'll find a place." They said, "Why don't you live in Dodd's house," which was a residence hall in Right Quadrangle. Yeah. And they said they've got a good bike team. Well, yes. I knew nothing about the bike teams. I knew nothing about the Little 500. But when I got there, it was a place for me to catch on. And I learned even as a rider, as a freshman, that the proceeds from the races were used for scholarships for students working their way through school. And in those days, this is way, way, way back, you could get 15 credit hours at IU for $105. $7 a credit hour is what it was.
But that was a lot of money back then.
It was a lot of money. If you had a $200 scholarship, you had your tuition paid for.
Very nice.
And the Little 500 scholarships were $200 for kids working their way through school. And that was my first exposure to philanthropy and how important it was and how impactful it can be for families and for individuals. So that was my exposure to philanthropy from the beginning.
Well, that's great. That's
in the process of the next 4 years, I got to know Bill Armstrong.
Okay.
And Bill Armstrong was the president of the IU Foundation, and as a junior, you could be a member of the Student Foundation, and he put me on that, and I got a committee assignment, which was promotions and tickets, by the way. And then as a senior, I became president of the Student Foundation, and that was my first introduction to philanthropy and higher ed.
That's great. From my days at IU, I remember him mostly from being, they named the soccer stadium after him. And of course, that was the days of Jerry Yeagley. Yep. And, the golden days of IU soccer. And although they still have a very good team, but he did quite a bit for the university.
Well, what he did is he built the soccer stadium because the place where we rode the bike race was the old stadium on 10th Street.
That's right.
And it fell apart.
It was like the Colosseum in Rome.
That's right.
When I was a sophomore.
That's it.
They tore that down after my sophomore year.
Well, you would have been there when Breaking Away, the movie, was done.
Well, no, that was a little bit before me, but I came just after that. in the 80s when that was still there.
That's where they filmed that race.
Correct.
That's
yeah,
where they filmed
that's where they did the race, and that was always kind of a neat thing because it was like this old relic kind of ruin when we would go see my siblings.
Yes.
Because the new stadium had been up there even before my oldest brother was there, but I always dragged my dad to go down there because I loved football stadiums as a kid, and we could get in.
Well, the location has been turned into an arboretum.
Yes.
But yet the corner posts for the horseshoe are still there.
Yes.
So it's one of the great things about IU. They respect the past.
Yeah.
And they revere the past, and so we try to preserve those kinds of things. And anyway, that was my introduction to philanthropy. After I graduated, Bill offered me a job to be the advisor to the Student Foundation. I thought, this is great. I get to stay on campus.
Wow.
I get to stay involved with the students. And it was really very exciting to have that opportunity. So my job was to work with the students in the Student Foundation as they raised money for scholarships. But in the process, I had to learn the business of annual giving, fundraising. We did the first capital campaign, which was the sesquicentennial campaign, and I had a little territory in that too. And so I got a chance to learn the fundraising side of things. And that was the interest. And you can see the impact of fundraising, which is exciting, especially if you're focused on what the students need. What to make something that made their lives possible, handle whatever the issues were there for them, and a lot of it was money.
Yeah, well, it pays the bills, doesn't it? It pays the rent and so forth, because that's what makes the university go. Now, during your period, and in the period coming up and since, but really during your period, the note I have is really since about 1990, IU has, I'm reading from IU, had consistently ranked among the top 20 universities in the nation in total voluntary support from the private sector. I mean, from people giving to the school, because I know that, my brother liked being involved in that, and he knew everybody who was, as you know, a lot of people who are big, especially here in the Indianapolis area, in the region of central Indiana, really big supporters of the university. And then you also became, that is IU, one of the top 15 public universities in the market value of its endowment. How did that, please, tell us a little bit about that story, because that's quite a bit. It's grown quite a bit.
The loyalty of IU alumni and friends is so deep and so strong. And we're a big university. I think we have the second largest alumni body in the world. With all the 9 campuses, it's around 750,000 alums. And the challenge is to communicate with them in a way that made sense, would give them the opportunity to be impactful in their giving. And that's what happened. We crossed $100 million. I think 1990 was the first year we crossed the $100 million. And from then we built, because we started doing capital campaigns. Capital in the sense of not necessarily buildings, but endowment.
And cash, money, as opposed to, yeah.
And for me, being focused on what the university needs to have done to continue its excellence or to build its excellence is the most gratifying piece of philanthropy. And if I would tell you my favorite campaign, it would be
Please do.
It would be the campaign we call the Academic Endowment Campaign. We were last in the Big Ten in endowed chairs and professorships for the faculty, and we'd hear this over and over again. And finally, the board of the foundation said, "What are we going to do about it? What can we do about it?" And so we focused the campaign very much on endowed chairs and professorships, and the endowment was a piece of the strategy to build the consistency of support as we went along.
I'm sorry, I just I remember because I graduated before you came on board, and the thing is, I knew that there were a lot of professors, because I was in liberal arts with journalism and history, that, I would come back to school or I'd find out, and then they'd moved on to Syracuse or down to one of the schools in Georgia or beyond, and that that the competitiveness of getting top grade professors was very
and keeping them. And keeping them.
Correct.
One is to attract them, the other is to keep them. But if you got an endowed professorship in somebody's name, say the John Gibbs Professor of Journalism or whatever it would have been, honoring your brother kind of thing, that was a big deal. That said the institution values you. And in the academic world, an endowed professorship, a named endowed professorship is the coin of the realm.
Yeah.
It says you are really special, and
Yeah.
we want you to come here, and we want you to stay here. Started that campaign, we had 61 endowed positions. At the end of the campaign, we had 471.
Wow.
471. An endowed chair was $1 million in those days, and then professorships were lesser amounts. But it focused on what the institution said it needed. You don't let the fundraisers decide what to raise money for, but the
Sure.
institution has to tell you.
They have to know what they want.
That's right. And in this case, we had this very clear direction. We had this very clear set of objectives, and it really worked well.
Well, very, very nice. And with that, can you tell us a little bit about how a foundation, because IU is kind of unique, because UCal almost has, I'm jumping over here because I think of about multi-campus, where they're kind of almost like their multi-campus is almost like it's its own college. So it's a different kind of multi-campus where they're all unique, like Berkeley and LA and all of the other various UCal schools, whereas at IU, it's still Indiana University, Northwest and et cetera, in here in Indianapolis.
Well, the UC system is really a confederation
Right.
rather than one university.
Right.
But they are great institutions. In the ones you say UCLA and you say UC San Diego and you say UCSF and Berkeley are fantastic institutions. They're great institutions, but they operate really independently.
Yeah, that's what I was meaning, where is very different from like IU.
Yeah.
It's there's multi-campus, but it's its own state, if you will. When you use the term confederation, it's like they're Virginia and Missouri and California. They're very different.
Very much so.
On their focus and so forth.
Well, we go back to the great president. Our greatest president was Herman Wells. And he saw the need to serve the whole state. And so he created regional campuses for the people who were place-bound in Lake and Porter County, or in South Bend,
Gotcha.
or in Fort Wayne, or in Evansville, wherever it was. We wanted to make it possible for people to get an IU education wherever they live, because a lot of people are place-bound. And they're working and they're raising families, and yet they need a master's in teaching, for example, and they could do it from home. And I think that's one of the uniquenesses about the IU system is we're everywhere. We're around the state. And now we have 9 locations of the medical school. We have the largest.
Really? I knew there was Indianapolis and I knew there was Bloomington. Those were like the two, because Indianapolis has all the hospitals.
Yep.
You can diversify your location.
Yep. But we have a medical school in Gary. We have a medical school in South Bend that Notre Dame wanted to affiliate with us there.
Gotcha.
We have a medical school in Muncie so that Ball State can connect with us now. And now the latest one is in Evansville.
Okay.
Which brings together the University of Evansville, the University of Southern Indiana, and Ivy Tech. There's a role for all of those in medical education, and it really works. So we've got the largest medical school in the world in terms of the entering classes are 300 in the entering classes. So we're producing a lot of physicians.
I was going to say that's very positive, because there's a great need for medical doctors and nurses.
Oh gosh, that's the truth. The healthcare system is overrun with need, if you will.
The need is a big in capital letters. Yeah.
And the nursing profession is fantastic. And the good news is the schools like Butler and UIndy, et cetera, are doing nursing too. And that's very, very important. But we have them all on all the campuses, and we still don't produce enough.
Gotcha.
For what the needs are. But that's another focal point when you can talk about the next campaign that I really enjoyed was the medical school. It was very focused, and we raised a major amount of money for the medical school at that time, and because that's what the institution was emphasizing. And it's a very gratifying world to be in. I had a president at the University of Oregon named Bill Boyd, and he was the best wordsmith I ever knew. And in 2 sentences, he put it all together. He said, scholarship writ large, which is discovering new knowledge, transferring it to the next generation and applying it. Scholarship and philanthropy are each separately among the most powerful forces at work shaping the future of our society. In combination, they may be unsurpassed in their capacity to improve the human condition. That's what it's all about.
Yes.
That's what we're talking about when we talk about what universities are doing. We're about improving the human condition, whether it's medicine or not. The liberal arts now are not as popular because they're not as vocational, if you will. But we need the liberal arts, we need the humanities and the social sciences, for example, to understand what's happening to us with the advent of technology. How do we handle technology in a way that doesn't fracture us, rather brings us together? And part of it is to understand the human condition, which is what the liberal arts, the humanities, and the social sciences are about. So in combination, those all come together in really interesting ways to, I think, do good things. Now that means, I'm wandering around on you here a little bit.
No, that's fine.
But there's always a kind of a repurposing and adjusting to the marketplace in education. The Kelley School of Business is an absolute powerhouse. Their freshman class is 2,500. So you have 10,000 students on the Bloomington campus who are in Kelley, and you've got a big number here and all the other places. And at the same time, the liberal arts are not as popular. So you're always adjusting to what the marketplace is. And it makes for a lot of stress, because inside an institution, if I'm a chairholder or a professor of whatever it might be, sociology, for example, and the number of students taking sociology is going down, and a spot opens up because somebody retires, you want to replace them. Not if you don't have the students. So you have to think about, okay, where do we need the money?
Yeah.
But it causes enormous stress within the institution.
Oh, I'm sure it does.
And IU is a bottom-up institution. There are top-down institutions, which is, the president says you're going to do this, you do this, no argument. A bottom-up institution is a lot more difficult to manage.
Yeah.
And that's one of the places that we are right now at IU, is this readjusting to what the marketplace is. We cannot not have a Department of Philosophy. We cannot not have a Department of, you name it, because it's really important in the underpinning of society. And we go back to Bill Boyd's scholarship and philanthropy are each separately. So, sorry.
No. That's quite good. I'm because I think those are, you're definitely touching on the ideals of the university, and I think that, with the kind of cultural division we have today, and I'm speaking from a student who was in liberal arts, I think that's had a great effect on that culture. Now, business, an old girlfriend of mine, her mom taught at
Kelley?
in Kelley, and Mrs. Wise, and John, my late brother, was at IU and just loved Kelley. And he really loved the school and was very, very involved as he went into business and so forth. And that has its own, it's like its own little college, It's, and of course with med school, medical school is you kind of have your. I had one of my housemates down in Bloomington did the Bloomington, Indianapolis back and forth project, and he really liked that unique relationship of being able to come up here and then be in Bloomington, because they're two different locations and they have their own advantages. It's and then now you've said it's expanded, so that will help students all over the state.
It works. Kelley does a fantastic job of launching careers. I mean, they are fantastic about engaging the professionals in whatever aspect their business is. And the students get exposed to them starting in their freshman year. The networks of alumni who work with them are just fantastic. And the same is true with medicine. If you go to school in South Bend, you've got the local physicians who are virtually all the physicians in Indiana graduated from this medical school.
Yes.
And they want to be a part of supporting those people as they come through the process so that they get a real hands-on experience.
Well, I think the thing about it's always good to have a businessman around because I think when I look at the university and what you're saying, I mean, it's been a few years for me, but that makes sense because the businessmen know business. They know how to, if I can say it, grow people if they're good. Now, there are a lot of businessmen who just kind of go do that thing over there. I hired you, and then come back and I'll judge you if But the good ones who are from faculty, but people who are involved in business, they're going to want to craft people, if you will, and that means success for them, and it'll come back to reflect on the school.
Oh, no question about it. I'm very interested.
Which it has done with Kelly. I mean, it's had great success.
I'm very interested in IU Northwest because it's our stomping grounds as kids
where we
growing
grew up.
But one of the things that we're talking about is how do we engage with the business community, the students who are at IU Northwest in business. And we've discovered a company that works in micro internships.
Oh, really?
And what they're after is you're a student in business at IU Northwest, and there's a business over here that needs a project done. They'd like to have you do that project. They don't want to build a department. They don't want to put a full-time person.
Sure.
But they want somebody who can bring in a conversation about the research that says this. The idea of that is to give you a credential as a student.
Right.
The idea for me as the businessman is say, I now know about IU Northwest Business Program. We should be recruiting those kids.
Yeah.
And why is that good? Well, it's good because those are the students who will stay in Northwest Indiana, and they will build the economic part of the community.
Yeah.
And I discovered that one of our alums, a guy named Dan Ahrens, has a company that actually seeks to do that, and they've done it with HBCU's institutions, the black institutions, and they've done it with Smith College. So they've run the gamut, and we're working with them now to build that kind of a program for IU Northwest, and we could do it in South Bend.
Sure.
And we can do it in Kokomo, and we can do it in Richmond, and that'll give the university a chance to give those students what you just said, hands-on, real experience in the business world while they're going to school, and yet build those credentials so that people will recruit them.
Yeah, I think of that's a very good idea because it takes apprenticeship up a step.
Good point.
And I think that, well, in my days, a lot of it was on your own.
Yeah.
You go out and do it.
Good luck, yeah.
And for me, it was a buyer's market. Being in journalism, that was a buyer's market, and that I think was part of the challenge of liberal arts, is that was one of the issues we had. But I think with business, that is a great idea, and I think especially today with all the things, the negative things younger people are having to deal with, that having someone there to be able to help them to succeed will help the student and help the community, and that comes back positively on the school. So as you're saying, the school moves in that direction, they can only add benefit to the state.
Well,
and beyond, because people are from all over who does IU, as I don't know this because it just came up in my mind, when I was at IU, I think we had the largest international student population in the country. I don't know if that's still true or not.
I don't know if it's the largest, but it's substantial. It's in the thousands,
it's
small
very,
thousands.
Yeah.
But it's there, and that's good for us. The small town people from Indiana need a little bit of exposure to the world, if you will.
Well, go to 4th Street and you have all those international restaurants.
Right. Well, those are all the people that didn't want to leave. They
exactly.
Built the things. But, well, you remember we had the brother of the Dalai Lama who had one of those restaurants.
Right.
And he used to come back every 2 years. So we'd see the Dalai Lama every couple of years. But that's the international.
His sister have a restaurant?
Yeah, that's it. The Snow Lion.
Yeah, that's it.
But that's because here we are in the heartland, and we're not on either coast, and yet we're a world university.
Correct.
And we have probably as good a percentage as anybody. 63% of our students have an international experience while they're in the 4 years, which is great.
Yeah.
Which is great. And we've built that into a variety of things. We have an honors college, which is the top 10% of the students. And one of our friends, one of our donors, gave the money so that every student in the honors college, once during her 4 years, would get enough money to go overseas.
Wow.
And have an experience be that. Why did he do that? He came out of the business school and knew Dr. Wells. And after the war, his job was to procure materials to rebuild Germany that we
Yes.
bombed. He ran into Wells, who was rebuilding the education system there.
Uh-huh.
And so he gave us the money because of that linkage, because he knew that Wells was a world leader.
Yeah.
And so now it's the Ed Hutton Honors College, and every student will get a chance to go overseas with that.
Well, very nice. Can I go back to college?
I'm too old. I can't run up and down the hills anymore.
Exactly. Well, the thing is, that would be very fun. I studied briefly, but I was in London where I was tracking towards transitioning from being a photographer to being a history professor. And so I spent some time. And I also wanted to live abroad. And that was a unique experience. And one of your recent graduates, Maria, who was on our show recently, she's going on to another university for her master's degree, but she at IU she studied multiple languages. It was Indonesian and Chinese, and I mean she has, you know, for someone who's a recent graduate, she's been all over the world. And they could probably do with her in Washington, you know. But, you know, being able to have that kind of studying program really does, that's amazing for students and for our students, and then for people who are from abroad who've come to Indiana to study.
And both are enriched. Both experiences are enriching. We had a granddaughter who went to Barcelona this last year. Well, she can't wait to go back and see more. IU Bloomington teaches 81 international languages. 81, more than anybody in the world.
Yes.
And some of them are pretty esoteric.
Really, more than Oxbridge.
Oh, yes. Oh,
Yeah.
yes. Oh, yes.
That's interesting.
81 languages. But again, go back to that Russian Language Institute. The State Department came to IU and said, we're in the Cold War with Russia. We'd better know the language. That's how that developed at IU, but that was Wells.
Interesting. Was it? Yeah. It's, well, that's how you build a major university, don't you? You have to meet the need. And
Well, the state has been very supportive. The partnership between the state and the legislature and philanthropy has been very good. We've been able to say to the state, we have gifts that'll do this much if you will help us do this piece of it.
Sure.
We can hire the faculty, but we need a building or we need a lab or whatever it might be. And it shows up in things like nursing. Where every one of the regional campuses really produces what we need in terms of healthcare.
That's a real need, and that takes care of, because I think when I think of like the time I was growing up, we're kind of induced to think you can do whatever you want, go everywhere, and so you've got all these people kind of going out doing the rucksack thing, you know. Who's the writer who did the I'm sorry, I'm not remembering his name. Kerouac.
Oh yeah.
The whole rucksack kind of go do your thing type of thing, but eventually you got to come home or go to what becomes home, and that realization of meeting needs, that's really, I guess that to me, I would think that's where the real purpose of a state university would actualize its purpose.
Well, what does society need? We've got the #1 school of environmental and public affairs, school of the SPIA, which is named for a donor who made a major gift. But what are we going to do about the environment if somebody doesn't study it?
Correct.
And understand it. I loved having a student who came into my office last spring, and I said, what are you going to do? She's going to work for the Indianapolis Water Company. And my job is to look at the canals. and see how clean they are. We watched the Olympics where the Seine River had to cancel an event because of whatever was the runoff from that kind
okay.
And see it, so it's real. It's a real issue kind of thing, and that's what she was doing. What she is doing is working with the water supply and the canals that move through the city, the White River and all the rest of it.
Oh yeah,
it's important stuff.
It's very important, and we take it for granted.
We do. We assume it's all good.
We assume it's just going to take care of itself. You're driving down the road, and it's like, oh, that's going to be fine. And we grew up with Chicago to the west, and Dad worked in Chicago, and I remember going up there, and it's like the Chicago River. I remember seeing old pictures of like crazy stuff that, and like they push stuff into the river, and it's like, how did that thing survive?
Well, and we're dealing with it now.
Exactly.
Lake County is we've got to reclaim Lake County because of all the stuff that was left from the steel industry.
Oh, that's very, very, very true.
And we're doing it. We're reclaiming it, and it's important to that vitality we're talking about economically, and it's important for young people to have an opportunity to do something to make their contribution. There's another piece that we're thinking about, that I'm in discussion about. Diversity is under fire right now. Diversity inclusion is under fire right now. And I had a conversation with one of the people who works in it on a full-time basis. And I said, maybe we should be looking at it from the other side. What are we trying to do to make sure that the immigrants that come into this country can make their contributions? Are we educating them in a way that makes it work? And if I'm in Elkhart County and I've got an RV industry, and now you're having a lot of international people coming to work in those industries.
Sure.
And the question is, can they understand the culture? Can they understand the language? Can they understand the economics of living in the United States? Well, we as a university at IU South Bend could very well step in and say to the RV industry, let us work with your staff or with the people you're bringing in so that they can become a part of this culture and feel comfortable. That isn't going to give us more students, but it will give the manufacturers educated people who can stay with them and make a contribution economically. So there are just a lot of ways, I think, that a university that reaches all those edges can make their contribution.
Yeah, it's sort of training people. One thing I was impressed by my stepfather, his name's Bill, and he had been involved in heavy manufacturing equipment sales. So he supplied trucks and vans and things to manufacturers. But the one thing that he did that I thought was really superlative is that he all of his employees, he would sit down with them and study them, and then he'd have them take self-study, personality tests or whatever, not to psychoanalyze them, but to see where their strengths and weaknesses were, and to build on those. And so he really took care with his employees to meet their success. And I can only think that if they do that in that direction, no matter who it is, if you bring people on board, because their success is going to be the success of the city.
Absolutely.
And so that can only
and that's exactly what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
Your stepdad was ahead of the game.
Yeah.
Which is to figure out how do we make you, give you a chance to be productive, satisfy your desire to take care of your family, and at the same time contribute to the well-being of the culture.
And I think the way that corporate culture, business culture, people say corporate culture, there's a politic to that, but business culture in general, the way it's changed from the days of, our parents, is that where, you might work for one or two companies most of your life, where now, most people now, they're working for at least 4 or 5, and how that, now we're getting more and more vulnerable economically, so it's like, how can we bring that back towards, building something that will have some lasting value.
And that boils down to people being productive individually.
Yeah.
Families being productive. being one of 9 kids, I was grateful that my dad had a job.
I bet it made you competitive at the dinner table.
Well, you better get there fast. And if you're playing on the baseball team, sorry, the food's gone by the time you get home.
I bet.
But we had enough animals. I ate a lot of chicken. Got tired of eating chicken on the thing. And,
yeah.
but
I like chicken.
Well, I do too, but not every day.
Not every day.
And the thing that exposed me to was 4-H.
Oh, yeah.
And those kinds of things. So I had exposure to Purdue, too. And that's another great university we have in this state. We're lucky to have what we have. And not just Purdue and IU. You've got Notre Dame, you've got Ball State, you've got Indiana State, you've got Southern Indiana, you've got Wabash, you've got Hanover, you've got all these really fine schools.
Yeah.
So we have a lot of opportunities for people to do well. And for a state our size, to have the richness that we have in educational opportunities, astounding.
It really is, because usually with what we have, you usually think of the bigger states like California or New York, who have a lot of space, and they have a lot of schools too. But well, Curt, talking about the new generation, what would you say, or give someone advice who's coming up, who's a student, and who's, they're developing as a person, deciding what they want to do, and who would be interested in higher education, philanthropy, and development? What kind of advice would you give to this person?
Well, the first thing I would say is develop your communication skills. The soft skills are so important. Can you connect with people? Can you be interested enough in people? Do you have a broad enough view of the world that when you go into somebody's office that you can look at the walls and really understand what they're interested in? If you came into my office, you'd hear classical music playing and you'd see art on the walls.
Very nice.
So if you were a development officer and you came into my office, you'd be getting messages about what my interest is. And I did that all the time.
Sure.
And it was such a pleasure because it put you into where they were. And I would say to Sid Eskenazi, for example. Here, you go to Sid's office and you see all these things that he's had his fingers in, and he tells you what he's really interested in. He's interested in art, he's interested in medicine, he's interested in whatever. And so a person who has the sensitivity to read what's going on is the first step, I think, in success. Now, the skills has to be there, whatever the skill is. But it can be investments, it can be communications, it can be fundraising is really simple. There are 4 I's of fundraising. I've said this for 40 years. The first I is to identify who cares or who you think will care. The second I is to inform them of what you're trying to get done and what the impact will be. The third I is to involve them in some way in what you're trying to get done. And the fourth I is invest. Identify, inform, involve, invest. So it's a sequence. So you need to know a little something about all of that. And then the apostrophe S is stewardship. Did you do what you said you'd do with the money? Did it have the impact that you said it would have? And did you report back? And I love being with Sid because he'll talk about the successes of the things that he's invested in. In our campus, it's the art museum, it's a bunch. But at the medical school, at the hospitals.
The hospital downtown is developing a name for itself.
Fantastic.
I mean,
it's wonderful.
It's right there at the street level, and it's like, it's very important that we have a hospital like that.
And in so many ways, old Wishart Hospital served a purpose, but it was like you were identifying as low income, marginal in terms of sustenance when you were there. You go into Eskenazi now and you're uplifted because it's beautiful.
Right.
And it's got art on the walls, and it's got its own vegetable gardens and stuff like that. So you go in there and you don't think...
It's a healthier environment.
Well, exactly.
It's more breeding, healing.
Yeah, exactly. But you don't feel like you're the low end of the scale all the time. You're getting the same kinds of things, and that's one of the wonderful things about philanthropy. You really can make a difference.
Yeah,
you really can and do make a difference, and it's exciting. Now, that's not to say that the extracurriculars aren't fun, People in Indiana still identify with basketball just a little.
Very much, very much.
And we're trying to identify with football too. And right now, Purdue's doing a great job in basketball, and neither one of us are doing any good in football. But it brings
rebuilding time.
It is, but it brings people into the conversation.
Yeah.
Even at Cal, even at Berkeley, they wanted to have decent football and decent basketball, because no matter where you are on the world scale as a great institution, you need to bring people in and have them look through the window of, if it's athletics, into the institution, fine.
Gotcha.
Sorry, I'm taking you all over the...
No, it's like I like doing this little surf around, because you have to be involved with what you've done, and you continue to do, even in Emeritus. You're still involved, and you've got to look at the whole world. You're like a general. You're dealing with all the divisions and all the platoons and what have you. You're looking at everybody, and you've got to kind of get them all together, or you're involved with them coming together in their own capacity. And so, no, I like that. I like the meta picture of things. But talking about that, how are universities changing in recent years? I'd say, we're now 24, so we're a quarter into the new century. And any time works. Mm-hmm. How are things changing on a university level, and what do you see as, since we're on topic about development and philanthropy, about how that will change with how universities are evolving with time?
Well, there's always adjustments.
Yeah.
In the university scale. You used a term that a moment ago, and you said, I was in a seller's market for journalism at the time. There were the jobs out there. And that tells you, at a period of time, you can go into that field and be well off. Well, those things come up and down.
They do.
So one of the things that has to happen is the university has to be attuned to what's really hot. President Miles Brand brought in Michael McRobbie to develop the technology piece of the university.
Yes.
And we went from the bottom of the heap to the top of the heap in terms of technology as a university during that time. He also fostered the development of the School of Informatics, which is the application of ways to mine big data kind of thing and apply it to whatever the issues are and problems. So you see, there was an evolution there. And if as a university you're not tuned in to where things are going, and remember, what we're getting out of universities more than any other place is new ideas, a new approach. A lot of the things that are happening in research, they may come out of AT&T or wherever it is, but where were the roots? Their roots were in various spots of research that were so upstream that you didn't see the economic development of them. But somebody has to do the upstream stuff.
Oh, yeah.
And as it comes downstream, then the people see, hey, we can apply this and turn it into a product that'll take care of this issue. That's the big challenge, I think. And when people talk about you're more interested in research than you are teaching, research is a part of it.
It is.
You're developing the new knowledge that we can give to you as a student that you can apply and change the world, basically.
Well, there's so many elements to learning and to the whole business, if you will, of having of being a school. I mean, in the past, the old days, it was, you had the liberal arts, and essentially, in earlier times, it was like you're developing, lawyers, doctors, clergymen, and, the men who are going to run the country. And that's grown quite a bit, especially after World War II, when gals started going to college, and then everything just expanded, and you have like everybody. When I was at IU, it's like still everybody kind of went to college. That's changed, but it was for decades. It was everybody. It's like, where are you going? When you're graduating from high school, and so that was very fascinating.
Well, that has changed, and I think one of the things that we have to do in university level research institutions like us in Purdue and the bigger institutions, we have to figure out what our linkage is to Ivy Tech. We have to think about what's the career path for these. And the Lilly Endowment has put money into the Ivy Tech schools to encourage people to get in there and learn whatever it is. The next step may be, why don't we provide scholarships for those Ivy Tech graduates who aspire to finish the undergraduate degree and maybe the master's, but that linkage is really important. And so our different roles, Ivy Tech, the teachers' colleges, and the research universities, there's a sequence there.
Yeah, there is.
And that's what the California schools have done. The community colleges in California are superb. Then there's the Cal State system, the Chico State, the Humboldt State, and then there's the UC system. And those are the R1 schools.
My brother and I had gone to, because we were doing an R&D in the last decade. In 2015, we went to MIT for the MTech. I've never met so many high-end, brainy people in my whole life in one place. And Caltech had an amazing. There was one professor there. She was telling us about how they're trying to develop glass. Glass, when it's small, won't break. But that size, it'll break. You can go like that. And they were trying to figure out how to expand it for structuring, how they could use the dynamic. I mean, that's just one example. And that's when AI came out. And there's positives and minuses on that. That's a Pandora's box, But AI was a big thing, and 3D printing.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
We do that in the Art Museum. It's astounding.
It's become like everybody does it now.
I can't believe it. It's just amazing. But the Caltech, the MITs you just described them as these brainy people that did amazing kind of things. Now, who do they have to talk to communicate that? To learn to communicate that in a way that takes a different set of skills.
Oh, it does.
And so you end up with a kind of okay, we've got this piece of research now. How do we communicate how we're going to apply it, and then how do we sell it? Because it has to sell and make its contribution.
Well, MIT and Caltech have some.
Oh, they're fantastic.
Pretty deep pocket people to support that.
They do, and that's part of
where you go if you want to make something happen.
They're
for research.
Great institutions.
Yeah.
But again, we have great institutions in this state. We don't aspire to be Purdue. We don't want to do what Purdue does.
Yeah,
and Purdue doesn't aspire to
specialty.
what we do. We've got in combination two great universities that come at things from a different direction.
Yeah. And that's good because the more you have, you cover more ground for everybody. And not everybody's the same. Well, to conclude, Curt, this has been a great conversation. What is coming up for the President Emeritus? What do we have?
What's next?
What is next?
I realize that I'm living the dream. I get to go in, I get exposure to students, I get exposure to faculty. And basically what they're saying is, do you have any experience with this? How would I go about that?
Right.
And on a daily basis, it's a pleasure. People talk about students, what they do, and they're wonderful. If you're around students, it's the most uplifting thing in the world. I have a series of scholarships that people put in place when I retired, and these kids are just amazing in trying to figure out what they can do.
Yeah.
And so I'm really lucky, and what I hope every day is that I find a way to add value. Great. But it's mostly in the context of what's going on today, not what happened in the past. But stay out of this mud puddle.
Gotcha.
And guide yourself in that. So I'm so grateful for IU and the foundation, J.T. Forbes and the president, for letting me stay involved.
Yeah. Well, Indiana University is fortunate to have you with them, having been involved in what you've done for the school.
I can't tell you how grateful I am. Indiana University's had its hand in everything that was good. And people who, one of the things that happens to us that we don't know is people put opportunity in front of us, and we don't know it. And we don't know they're observing us. But they put opportunity in front of you, and they see how you do. And then they give you the next opportunity and the next. And it's I try to do that with the students.
That's great. Well, that gives them hope. And it also gives them something to work toward, to build on for their lives. So, Curt, thank you very much.
Thanks for having me.
It was great having you
real pleasure
with us today. Well, thank you so much. Well, ladies and gentlemen, Curt Simic was our guest today on the Omnibus Show. We would like to thank our sponsor, Hotel Carmichael, and we are recording today at Feinstein's. We look forward to being with you on the next episode of The Omnibus Show.
If you enjoyed this program, please like, share, and subscribe to continue the conversation. For the Omnibus Show newsletter, please sign up at theomnibusshow.com.